Welcome to Career Coffee Chat Live. I'm your host, Erin Urban. I'm a certified career strategist and executive coach, and what I do is I help driven experience, emerging professionals, and evolving leaders help remove their roadblocks so you can achieve more impact, income, and influence. Today, we'll be talking about how to influence your mindset to match your resume with Landi Spearman. So for those of you just tuning in to the live show, please say hi, say where you're from. I'd love to welcome you to the show. And if you've never seen my smiling face before, you can find out more about me at coachyurban.com. And of course, don't forget the Career Coffee Chat podcast available on all the major channels, including my YouTube channel, as well as Amazon. Who knew? It's also on Amazon. And you don't even have to wait 2 days. Or as my mother has found out, you have to wait a lot more than 2 days for some prime things to show up at your doorstep. So for those of you tuning in, please don't hesitate to ask any questions that you have, because today we'll be talking about some very exciting topics, particularly when it comes to the future of work and being able to elevate your presence with a very dynamic workplace culture. Most of you have already figured out we'll be in remote work for quite some time to come, or at least a blended work methodology. And what does that look like? And how does networking work for us? How can we show up? What does our brand mean? How can we be more human in a very digitally dependent work culture? So let me let you know a little bit about our esteemed and very exciting guest. Landi Spearman is the Chief Change Officer, as she says, but she is the CEO. She's a powerhouse behind Organized Shift. Now, what Landi does is she helps leaders change the way they approach growth, disruption, and innovation. She has an affinity for having an honest conversation about generational gaps, organizational agility, and cultural blind spots. To meet the challenge of disruptive change, Landi created Organized Shift to help leaders move beyond fear, mind chatter, which I love that mind chatter, and denial to adapt and pivot faster. So if you're interested in adapting and pivoting faster, you will be thrilled to meet Landi Spearman. Landi, it is such a pleasure to have you on the Career Coffee Chat live show and podcast today.
Same here, Erin. Coach Erin, hello, good morning.
Great to see you. And I want to say hi to Christina, who's tuning in from Hudson Valley, New York. Hi, Christina. So for any of you tuning into this show, just know that both of us are more than happy to answer any questions and say hi also to Ricardo from San Antonio, Texas. Now, Landi, yes. I know that you have a backstory and that you started Organized Shift for a reason, and a very compelling reason, because you're a powerhouse, you're a woman of vision and innovation. And I would love for you to share with folks that are tuning in, what made you start Organized Shift? What was that need that you saw that you knew you could answer?
Wow, Erin, such a great starter question. You just jump right in there, don't you?
I get it.
I see. Okay, you said this is a conversation with my girlfriend, so we're going to talk. So what made me start Organized Shift? To be very honest with you, it evolved. It's kind of like this thing we're facing called a pandemic. When we're facing change, we know that the reality is that most people do not like change. As a matter of fact, they resist it. Stats and data show about 8 out of 10 people resist change, and that was pre-COVID. So I'm a data scientist, so I'll throw out some stats here. But I say that because I got very clear on the fact that we are not good at doing change, right? And so when you think about doing change, especially when it's as complex and volatile as it is now, it can add up and it can be very overwhelming. And the reality is, because it's not something that we're naturally good at, and we are actually resistant to your point about the mind chatter and the denial that we really do face, it was one of those things that it's like, you know what? So how do we optimize this? How do we make change better? Because it's going to continue to happen. And so the reason why I started Organized Shift was a couple reasons. One is I've always done coaching and consulting, like literally, I think all of my life since I was like yay tall, right? And I say that, Erin, because I grew up in business. And so being originally from Chicago, my parents owned 8 different businesses, Erin, 8 by the time I was 20 years old. So when you think about where we form our identity as humans, we normally form it, once we've made it. Like I've, went to school, or I've started this career, or I've followed this path, and now I've made it. I got the title that I want, right? And so I found that for myself in business very early on, because there wasn't a separation between home and work for me. So fast forward to our current workplace, in the work that I do one-on-one, or if I'm meeting with clients or teams, those are the gaps that I could see. Like, okay, these are patterns, right? People have issues with their own personal thoughts, right? And that shows up. If I'm a leader, that shows up. But Erin, who's going to tell the leader that they're doing something wrong? Right? Who's going to tell the leader that they're the person that is stopping progress? They're driving results. They're holding us all accountable. But those backstories, those things that they have. So I literally thought through, what does it look like when leaders are under stress? And have you ever moved before, Erin?
Oh, yes.
On a scale of 1 to 10, where do you rate moving?
Considering I'm currently moving my mother in stages from Virginia to Texas, I would say that it's really high up there.
Really high. So like 9, 10.
Like 15, 20.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Well, I get it at a very high level. So I get that, Erin, because I decided to do something about it. So about 5, almost 6 years ago, I actually tackled the problem of moving. And it's that change. It's the fact that it is one of the top 10, as a matter of fact, one of the top 5 stressors in life. So that's what you're currently facing, Erin, is one of the top 5 stressors in life. And if you think about it, do you know how to do a move well? Like, is that something that you're skilled at? Not putting things in boxes, not organizing, Erin, because I know you're very organized. Doing the move, everything it takes, the connection to our sense of belongingness, right? You see, so finding a house or finding a place is one step. It's everything that's involved with that human. It's everything involved with that person. If you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? It's those things. And as adults, we normally don't get, we normally don't have that self-actualization. We normally don't throw that back in there as adults, like, hey, we're both in the 2nd grade. The teacher puts me with the pal when I'm the new student in class. We don't do that as adults. We just get to work on Monday, right? And so I started a business that reduced the stress of relocation by focusing on the person who was making the move. Okay. And so fast forward that to Hurricane Harvey. You remember that because we're in Houston, right?
Right.
When Hurricane Harvey hit the 4th largest city, it hit Houston. At that time, 10,000 people were moving to Houston every single month, Erin. 10,000. So I was very busy. But when you focus on the leader who is getting to work quickly, who has a family, who may have boxes everywhere, when Hurricane Harvey hit, what I saw was those same leaders who I was relocating. And when I say relocating, I'm not just talking about the boxes again. We were doing everything from, like, the bed was made, there were groceries in the refrigerator. Can you imagine that for your mom? Like everything being done for you, and she just shows up with a toothbrush, right? And so that's the level of detail that we were putting into operationalizing this very stressful thing. So when Hurricane Harvey hit, we shifted that business model from moving boxes to moving mindsets. And that's where Organized Shift was created.
That's amazing. That's a serious move, from moving actual physical, like the physical move, really getting beyond that and embracing the more mental side of it, which the physical part you can probably get to, but the mental side of it, that goes much deeper and has a much more complexity. And when you're talking about moves, it's interesting because we're moving quite a bit in our current culture through and out of this pandemic. And what we're looking forward to is very, very different than where we have been. And how does that mindset, so we're all having to shift our mindsets to show up in a very different space. So for the individual leader who's emerging and evolving through this space, or for the high performer who wants to show up in this space, what are you seeing? Because part of it, you know, you were talking about shifting mindsets to match your resume. Where is the biggest pain point? What's the biggest gap you're seeing? Where are people kind of falling off the map, if you will?
Oh, very good question. So, I would probably say two key focus areas. One is, and I'll break it into the two different groups. So you said one
Mm-hmm.
is the emerging leaders, and then the other is the high achievers, the people who are seasoned and they know they've been here, done that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'll start with them. So for a high achiever, moving through or shifting a career or deciding where to go next, one of the biggest pain points is looking outside of ourselves versus going inside. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so, to your point about the complexity that it takes to really shift and think through your mindset, or to reflect and understand where you are and make decisions and choose to do something different about what's next. To become self aware is one thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I can meditate, I can slow down, I can practice mindfulness. Okay. These are not things that Generation X and baby boomers, these are not things that we grew up as in business knowing as, priority, right? And so when we think about slowing down to speed up, that is my suggestion. And one of the biggest pain points is we have not been taught that there is value in mindfulness. We have not been taught that there is value in going internally to create it externally. And so we normally put things on top. So we put another title on top. We put another, right, a certification. We get two more degrees. Oh, we layer well. And then we wear it on our sleeves. So I have these fabulous sleeves today, right? So we wear it on our sleeves. I've earned this position. I've earned this title. And we wear that so proudly that we actually get stuck with it. We get stuck with it. And so to answer your question regarding what does that pain look like, when you're stuck with who you are, how can you progress or see your blind spots for what's missing?
That's really powerful. And it's similar to what I talk to people about when we're really diving in to your career contributions, which are so important, not only for self-empowerment, actualization, understanding, okay, how can I provide the backstory to get from where I am today to where I want to go? I share with people, oftentimes our resumes, our career contributions are historical. They're obituaries, talking about everything we used to do.
That's good.
While it's not invaluable, it's valuable information. And let's talk about where you're going, and can you provide that information in a context based on where you're going? Because if you talk about what you've done, you'll just get more of the same.
Correct. And as I said, Erin, we're proud, right? So we're constantly willing and ready to talk. Yeah, I did all of these things. And so the second pain point, excuse me, I would say it lends to the fact that not only do we get stuck in our this is who I have been and I've earned this, but we actually hunker down in it. Right. And so when you look at the generational gaps, right? So, I tell people I speak English, I speak Spanish, hablo español, but I also speak millennial. And what does that mean? So growing up in those 5 businesses, I'm the oldest of 5. And there are 13 years difference between my youngest sister and I have a relationship with all of my siblings. But more importantly, because my parents were the second oldest in these very big families, Erin, 9 and 11 people, I worked with my aunts and uncles. I worked across 4 different generations. And so where that comes into business and where I see that now with our emerging leaders is that there are generational gaps and differences from I earned this as a boomer or an Xer. And as a millennial, I'm not worried about working 50 hours a week to say that I earned that or I got the title as a VP. I actually care about me. And so those gaps are there, right? The gaps are there. Between our styles of communication, between these things, we're saying, hey, you're entitled, you're lazy. And that is just not true. That is just not true. It's a different way of looking at things. They're unwilling to work 40 to 50 to 60 hours. If you develop them, if you help them to take the time, the gap that is missing on the other side, the other pain point, that I said I was going to give 2. with our emerging leaders is the personal development for professional growth.
Oh, yes.
Personal
I
development.
hear it all the time.
Right?
Even with seasoned leaders.
This is true. Listen, I wasn't going to say it, but this is very true.
It's a big pain point. How can I, because the differences in the narrative between the baby boomers and Gen X's and the millennials and then the generation behind them, it's a different mindset, how they approach life, how they approach work.
Correct.
And I coach in both areas. Okay. So what's interesting is the coaching focus for someone who identifies with millennial or younger is usually, how can I make an impact?
Yeah.
I want to make sure that my work, that my energy matters in the world. And there is this concern about work-life balance because they've seen it, Landi. They've seen this.
Their parents burn out, tired,
burn out, and you identify your life, your ego identifies with what you do. So when people ask you, oh, well, who are you? Instead of saying, oh, well, I really enjoy a hobby or
exactly.
hiking, we talk about, oh yes, I'm a data analyst, or I'm a Lean Six Sigma black belt, or I'm a CPA.
Correct. And so I love that you brought that up. And I actually I really focus on trying to make sure that, one, we see those differences, as you just highlighted here, and then two, we don't make ourselves wrong for it. We just choose to do something different. And that is truly the shift. So I started off, to your point, by saying I'm a data scientist, or like you said, a Lean Six Sigma professional. I'm a practitioner. I coach on Lean Six Sigma principles. And I say those things because those things for my Xers and my boomers, they matter. Those are the signals, right? So I connect and meet people where they are. So to your point, when we're coaching, it's like, I'm not saying that I'm in front of you or higher than, or I have all the answers. I'm saying that I'm connected to you with where you are. Now, what might be different is how we connect to each other with where you want to go next. And so the one thing that I would speak to my emerging leaders about is walking in the experience of yourself now. So think about this. Before you, let's see, what's a title that you've earned, Erin, that you're proud of, like your ICF certification, or?
So certified coach, certified IEQ, you pick one.
Okay. All right. See, I know you. I know you. I'm right here with you. So before you became I'll use ICF because I know that one well. Before you became a certified coach, were you doing the work, or did you just instantly say, "Oh, now I'm coaching"?
Oh, Landi, don't you know? You just take this pill, and so red or the blue pill. I'm kidding. So yes, of course, I've been coaching for quite some time. Actually, this is another certification that I'm working on several. Okay. So within ICF structures, you have different types of certification.
Absolutely.
Yes. Leadership certification through ICF at Coach Rice in the fall, and I'm currently pursuing NLP certification. But I've been certified in leadership and professional development so I've been practicing for quite some time. So to your point, no, it just didn't show up. And I want to say also hi to Michelle, who's tuning in from Lakeland, Florida. David from DC, Annapolis, Maryland. Hey, David, how you doing?
Hello. Good morning.
Christina mentioned, she said, it's so true. My dad is a boomer and my mom is a Gen X and I'm a millennial. So my siblings are Gen Z. So she could totally relate to where you're coming from. Yes. And I would love to ask, for those of you who are tuning in today, what is not only that generational, it might be generational language or narrative that is something that you're concerning about or wondering how that will play into the future of work, but also what are you seeing considering the shifts that we've experienced over the past year? What are some of your top pain points that you'd like to get some insights in when it revolves around how to elevate your presence, particularly now that we're in a very strong change cycle? So I'm going to get back to your point. You were asking me, did I just instantly take a pill? Yeah. Just like that.
Poof, and you're there. So I asked the question for two reasons. One, because obviously I knew the answer, and I know that you are very well accomplished, and you do have many things that you've been doing the work to earn, the designations that you have. But secondly, I asked the question because so often, and I'm going to tie this into the career. So often we are almost afraid. We're afraid of saying who we are. We are afraid of, this thing we talk about, authenticity. We're afraid of showing up as our authentic self, or this oh, how can I forget the word? Oh, because I don't use the word imposter syndrome. Those things. So when I say afraid, I'm speaking from that perspective. It's like, well, I'm not. How did I get here? I have this title. I'm not quite there yet. And so my suggestion or my recommendation around walking in the experience of yourself is to do just that. It's literally to do just that. So before I have this designation as a data scientist, and oh my gosh, no. It is a big deal. And we're going through Python, and I'm like, okay, Tableau, but this is my jam, telling stories with data and all that. But prior to that, I was working with STEM professionals. I was doing executive coaching for CEOs, CTOs, COOs, people who were very left brain, people who were focused on the analytical side of things, very methodical. I could see, and many of my clients, to be honest with you, Erin, about 2, 3, 4 years ago now, I would say about 60-70% of my clients were men. And I say that not because that's who I was marketing to, Erin, but it was because the way I think systematically could relate to the way that they think systematically. And that value, that connection was there. With that said, I also could show what was missing, the right side of the brain. So often, remember I said, Erin, how we hunker down into who we are, especially when it's time to be changed or challenged, or we just naturally resist it. We're humans, okay? When it's time to solve new problems like the complex, volatile, that VUCA that I'm using all the time, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous change that we're facing. That's constantly, it's like no end to it, right? So when we're trying to solve those type of problems, if you're the chief engineer or you're the CTO, if you only rely on your technical expertise, right? So when I was going through learning Python and code, if I only stay on that side of my brain, my left side of my brain, the flow, the creativity, the connection to the experience, even the emotions are data. Think about that. Your emotions tell you something. So you said you're getting certified in NLP. I heard that. One of my mentors, his brother is actually the founder of NLP. And yes,
wow.
ma'am. Yes.
That's
And
great.
so I'm certified in nonverbal communication. So I read people's verbals, the things that we don't say, right? But I bring that point up because when you're thinking about tapping into the emotions, the way you feel, these are not things, again, that we talked about in the workplace as Gen Xers or as baby boomers. My emotions? No, you're supposed to leave that.
Oh, you don't bring emotions to the workplace.
No, like, haven't you?
You don't bring emotions to the workplace. And
so you get it.
One of the things, this is one of the big roadblocks we have, is that shift, particularly for established leaders and emerging leaders who are merging into a space that has been shaped before, by their predecessors, that doesn't fit who they are. It doesn't fit their authentic selves and how they express themselves. And what does authenticity even mean based on which generation you identify with, and how can you show up in this very different marketplace, which is, FYI, not necessarily baby boomer generated. This new evolving marketplace that we're in a strong change cycle is more connected to the millennial strata and or Gen Z, if you identify with those two. So, it's interesting because a lot of people, particularly established professionals, aren't quite sure how to behave. They just don't know.
You're right.
They really don't know. How do I show up?
So that's, Erin, that's the reason why the work that we do at Organized Shift is focusing on humanizing leadership. That is exactly the reason why. When you think about humanizing leadership, it's getting back to the connection that it's not just the title, it's the person who's doing the leading. It's the person that's resisting the change. It's the person who's trying to figure out what's next. And normally, what do? We kind of do it. We hunker down. We go inside of ourselves instead of leveraging the diversity of our team, instead of being able to adapt and be agile and think through, oh, I need to show that I don't have all the answers. That can be very revealing. That's being vulnerable. You get what I'm saying? And so that's the part. Those are the things that connect to, again, humanizing leadership. And that is the reason why, to bring that story full back, why did I start Organized Shift? Because I saw when people were moving this top 5 stressor, they were stressed out, but they had to go to work. And they almost had to suppress how they were feeling in order to get the work done. And that is not the most productive way to go to work. I did cost studies and show, the cost of disengagement, productivity goes down, all of those things. So what we did when we shifted that business model from moving boxes to moving mindsets was still apply the same thoughts, the behavioral science behind how people react when they experience change, the data itself, what it shows. Okay, if we put these two things together, if we optimize this process, so I brought in that Lean Six Sigma, right? And the diversity so often, especially in this day and age, Erin, when we talk about diversity, we're normally thinking of what, race and gender, would you agree?
Right. Yes, unfortunately, yes, that's where it stops.
And here's the reality. I've given several examples just here today about diversity of thought, just because you might be a different age or from a different generation. So I
have a different, religious background. You're from a different country.
Exactly.
It's not, or maybe you have tattoos.
You know what? I have 2.
And by the way, tattoos don't make you stupid.
I have 2. I'm going to say that one time.
I mean, it's just all these assumptions. And what's very interesting, Landi, is right now we're experiencing such a strong change cycle. When people are talking about the new normal, it's like, there's no new normal yet. Wait, because that will be sometime in the future. I'm not sure when. But we have so many cultural biases. And it's not really cultural bias. It's just when you think about a bias, it has a bad connotation, but actually we all have them. You may not like vanilla, or you might like mint ice cream, and that's a bias, by the way. And we all have them. But it's these mental habitual modes of thought that get in our way of progress because we don't challenge ourselves enough. We don't challenge them.
I agree.
I mean, cognitive bias builds up drift over time, which means that it may or may not be true to the current state. And what I love is, I think this is DB Tunzel, actually. Sometimes she doesn't show up on StreamYard, but she says, I think people who make the most impact know how to balance analytical and the creative thinking.
That's good.
And can take solutions to a completely different place and has more value. Absolutely. That's so let's speak into those people who are more reserved. Because in this current strong change cycle, these individuals may be feeling a bit left out.
Okay.
Because suddenly we went from, oh, well, a phone call was fine, and now everything has to be on Zoom. Now we have to show up a different way. Now we have to engage a different way. And let's speak into these people and breathe life and thrive for these individuals, because they have to shift how they think and engage.
Are you this shift? You're the hashtag shift. You're constant. I just love it. I just need you to know. I love it. So, Erin, can you do me a favor, please? Can you tell me what you mean by more reserved? And I ask that question because in my mind, introverts might have a little bit more trouble showing up on Zoom. Well, after a year, we got a lot of practice, and then the other folks that I know that I know, love, and work with are my STEM folks. And so STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math folks who their professions, they're the doers, they're the creators of the new things, the innovators. A lot of times because, it's a very focused analytical profession. Sometimes their personality may be a little more reserved. So I just want to make sure I'm on the same page with you regarding what you mean by reserved.
Yes, that's those individuals who do not emote as much as perhaps I do. I talk with my hands, very animated. People with certain work styles, which we call more reserved, because I prefer not to label people introvert or extrovert, even though that is a psychologically adept term. So you identify with being more reserved, so less emotive, maybe less comfortable with always being on a Zoom call, maybe less comfortable with having the spotlight on oneself, maybe less comfortable with being the center of attention. So that would be someone who identifies as being more reserved.
Thank you. I'm clear now. Thank you very much. So when you said, let's speak into our folks that are more reserved. So hello out there. This is literally for you. Couple things. One is I have such great admiration for people who process things internally. I'm an auditory learner. And so, when you think about some people are very visual, some people are kinesthetic, they touch things to build. I'm auditory. So I process my thoughts by speaking or hearing. I don't just hear people and listen well. I process my own internal compass. And so I say that because when there is someone who is more reserved, I love that. I'm going to use that, Erin. When someone is more reserved and they're processing that thought, it's kind of like our LinkedIn user who put the comment in the chat. So often you have time, remember, slowing down to speed up. So, if you're an extrovert, you're the first person to have all the answers. You don't allow for the time to slow down and process and see the blind spots, see what's missing. Remember, I said emotions are data. So when we are not connected to our emotions, we're not processing, oh, wait, that was butterflies in my stomach. That means something. Oh, does that mean that I'm nervous? Does that mean that this is uncomfortable? So now I can make a different decision versus just pushing that down or omitting or pretending like it's not happening, right? And so when we are speaking to our folks who are, again, more reserved, to be aware of your emotions, to be able to process that as data to make different decisions. That's one way that we can speak directly into who you are. Another way is, as I said before, I don't make people wrong for being exactly who you are. I value your diversity of thoughts, your diversity of experience, and your diversity of perspective. And so when I say I value it, I think, Erin, one of the things, and I said, it's unfortunate that we just stop at race and gender, because those are the things that almost make us different. And so we kind of stand in where you're a woman, I'm a man, you're Black, I'm white, so I remember when I learned Spanish, I went over to Spain, Erin, to learn Spanish in 3 months. And the reason why I learned Spanish was because I had taken it like most of us had taken a foreign language in school. But I really wanted to immerse myself in the culture of another person, people. Now about a third, I think between a fourth and a third of our entire planet has people who speak Spanish. And I wanted to be connected to people in a way that I could value what you bring and your differences. And so when we're talking about our reserved folks, the fact that you have a different opinion because you had time, one, to think about it, two, the way you show up and what you bring to the table is different from who I am. That is something to be shared and to be celebrated. And so some of the ways that you can get around, if you're not the first to raise your hand or put something in the chat or, to speak up on the Zoom call, is to have these type of relationships, is to connect with someone that may be the person who is, may raise their hand or speak first, and make sure that you're connected to say, hey, do you mind if if I text you during our meeting, if I want to say something, you can make sure that I get heard, or push yourself outside of your comfort zone. Just because that is not something that you've done in the past, what does it look like to do it in the future? Can you walk in the experience of yourself? Maybe you don't say something verbally, maybe you put it in the chat. Maybe you process by creating an email beforehand if you know you're going to have questions and that's your natural behavior is to have, oh, I know I'm going to have a lot of questions, but I don't want to keep asking. Maybe put them in an email so that you can start to mark off and process different ways to get your questions answered. It's not a single perspective or a single dimension. Why? Because we're not dealing with the single one problem or one level of complexity. It's multifaceted across every race, across every gender, across all sectors, every industry, in all workplaces. Even as entrepreneurs, we're facing a different marketplace. It's not just, who I'm marketing or selling to, right? It's also the people that I work with, my colleagues. And then it's also the experience that I'm creating for the people I'm working with, because the consumers are now also possibly stakeholders and they have a voice, right? And then it's not just let me create something for my clients. It's also, what about my employees? What about the people that I work with, that I come alongside with every day? What is the experience like for them? So
absolutely. And for emerging leaders too. I mean, it's for emerging, evolving leaders and established leaders, full stop. I encourage you all to consider that how you lead collaborations, because for whatever reason, whenever we meet in teams, we always assume the leader is the one who's facilitating the conversation, even if they're not. So I would encourage those of you who identify with being a leader in any space and capacity to search and look for your subject matter experts, your people who are SMEs, and encourage them to speak up, because they will not do that naturally. So it's up for those people who are leaders and or facilitating the conversation to make sure that more airtime is given to those people who most may not naturally want to share that airtime, just on the flow, if you will. Because oftentimes the people who speak, as you mentioned, raise their hand and speak up first or speak the loudest are assumed to be the experts, and that's not necessarily the case, in fact. Typically, the people who are more reserved take time to process information and aren't necessarily the first ones to speak up. And what's also interesting when I was studying the psychology of teams is what we tend to talk about in team collaboration, Zoom, phone calls, or otherwise, doesn't really matter, in person. We tend to talk in terms of common knowledge. And what we need to find out is uncommon knowledge. And in order to innovate and show up in a strong change cycle, we need new information. Well, that's not typically shared. What's typically shared is common knowledge. So in order to find that, we truly do need to create a safe space. So to go back further in our conversation, we were talking about, as a leader, being authentic and vulnerable to say, I don't have all the answers. To part of creating that psychological safety in a group for those people who identify with being more reserved is, as a leader, showing up authentically like that, saying, I don't have all the answers, or I'm open to feedback, because you're leading by example. You're setting the expectation behavior. And Christina said something wonderful here. She said neurodiversity in the workplace needs to be more of an emphasis as well. And recruitment and teams, or creating teams, absolutely. Neurodiversity is also, so when we talk about diversity, you're so right. We stop at what I call skin deep. And it goes way beyond that. Way beyond that, and much, much deeper. It's much more complex.
Yes.
And so it's important for people to understand different work styles and honor them. It's important for people to really get to know their people and their teams as a person. And for those of you as an individual, getting to know those others that you work with as individuals, and creating, as Chris Coltonato on my show last year shared, tiny moments. The tiny moments that matter. Do not require you to stand up and be the center of attention.
That's right.
At the middle of a Zoom meeting. It can be an instant message. It can be a short hello, something very meaningful, email, or a phone call, whatever you're comfortable with. So creating those tiny moments that matter. As as someone who's more reserved or otherwise to, further your impact, right?
Coach Erin, it was how we met. A tiny moment was how we met.
That's
Think
right.
about that, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was, there was a lot going on. I think I was on stage maybe once or twice that day. There was a conference. I was in the back scene, connecting. It was a tiny moment. You saw me take a breath, right? It's so often we don't slow down and just breathe and process. So I think that, yes, that tiny moment, I love that way of seeing things. I would also add, this is exactly the shift I'm talking about. I put an F in there, Erin, shift. The shift that I'm talking about is, again, that connection to the right side of our brain, our emotional intelligence. And so when we think about the emotional intelligence that we have within, if we don't practice the muscles, if we just stay focused on our IQ, our technical skills, our analytical skills, if we stay focused there, it actually gets us to where we are today. That's I said it. It gets us to where we are today. So we have great technology that has taken us to a completely different level. We have so many advancements. And where are people here? Where are people? Where are the humans in this? How do we optimize the experience of being human? So I use SHIFT, right? I use that quite frequently. It's actually an acronym, Erin. The S, when we're thinking about humanizing leadership, the S specifically is for speed. Again, we do everything fast, or we're driving results, where we got the internet.
That's for sure.
Right? And you're talking about the change curve, right? So we're trying to get through the change curve so fast. We're trying to go through, get over resistance.
We don't want to. We're not going to the
we don't want to hit denial. I'm not doing that.
At the top. That's how fast we're going. Yeah.
Right? So that S is for speed, and it's being able to process how fast things are really going. And again, slowing down to speed up. So I'm going to pause there for 1 second. And I'm going to ask Erin, I know you love the hill country and being outside in the trees. Have you ever picked up a slingshot, Erin?
No.
Okay. So let me tell you, being from the city, I didn't have the one with the wood with the stick, but I made my own slingshot in the city. Okay, I found some branches
I'm not big into weapons.
Well, this is not a weapon. I want you to look at it this way. I'm not big into weapons either, Erin. This is the analogy that I want you to think of. Think about a slingshot. Think about a rubber band. Okay. So when you pull that rubber band back, what happens when you pull it back?
It gets tense.
It gets tense. It's tension, right? What if you keep pulling it back more? What happens? You're eventually, right? But it gets even more tension, right? So when you let it go, it can go further, right? If you pull it, the slingshot example, right? You pull whatever. If you pull, it's creating more tension, but it can go further. The reason why I'm giving that as an example, using that analogy as it relates to speed, is because it can go further faster. Right? But what did it take? It takes us pulling back. It takes us being mindful. It takes us slowing down to speed up. We normally just keep going, right? So I was reading, I was reading something about mindfulness, and I actually came across a video of yours too, where you were kind of talking about being motivated and what do you do to reset, right? So pulling back to speed up relates to that S. The S is for speed. The H is for this human to human experience, right? So the H is for getting connected as a leader. What experience am I creating for my employees? What experience am I creating for my team? What experience am I having? Being aware of that. Why? Because again, the way we've done things focused on just driving results, productivity, our numbers. If we just focus on that and we leave the people who are doing all the change, creating the impact, that OCM, that organizational change management, the focus there is on the people who are driving the change. Who is checking on them? So that's the H, is that human experience. So this is the consulting methodology that we use, right?
All right.
The I, and you said it before, is innovation. In order to innovate, to create and generate new ideas, we go to the people. So often we look at technology as the thing that's going to try.
Right, yeah, as a leader,
What? Go, go,
I
go.
can tell you, it's like, oh, we want to make things, we want to improve it, so let's automate something. Okay, so let's automate our waste.
We put it on top. Remember, we put technology on top.
Yeah, yeah. We have all this, pardon my French, crap, and then let's automate it.
Let's buy a new system. Let's bring in some new computers. Let's automate the system. Let's go cloud-based. But again, the I for innovation is the innovation of that mindset. It's leveraging the diversity. It's leveraging the diversity of perspectives, the diversity of thoughts. The fact that if we come together as a team, we can iterate faster. We can be more agile. Why? Because instead of me just thinking of all the ideas and just coming up with everything myself and putting it out to the world and saying, okay, let's test it. That's the way we've done in the past, right? What we do now is don't be afraid to fail forward.
We have to create that safety. That's a big thing, creating
psychological safety. You said it.
Awarding failure. And anybody listening in, please let me know. When was the last time you were awarded for failure?
Ooh, I like that.
We don't do this as leaders. We don't do this as team leaders, as subject matter experts or facilitators. We don't award failures. We don't award admitting mistakes.
That's good. That's good. And I think that the awarding of the practice, remember, if we're not used to exercising that muscle, right? If we're not used to doing that, then it won't happen. What we don't measure, right? If we're not measuring it, then it doesn't matter, right? What we measure matters. So being able to create a safe space to talk about some of the things we're really dealing with, being able to bring your whole self to work, being able to do those things, and then saying, okay, now the person who's leading the change, the person who is has this different perspective that I do, the person, when we come together interpersonally, those that, first I focused on me, now how do I bring my team together? That's that emotional EQ and teams that I'm constantly speaking to. It matters. That's how we innovate. That's how we iterate, right? Because we create solutions together. I may have the concept and idea, but because you're closest to the problem over here in your life, in your community, in your area, or you've had a different, you've come from a different industry or background. So you were in healthcare, now I'm in food safety. You were in oil and gas, now I'm in tobacco. Like, we have different ways to look at things. And so therefore we can bring our whole self to work to solve different problems. So that's the I for innovation. The F is for flexibility.
And we're not talking about yoga.
Well, I do bring mindfulness in here, but you are absolutely right. We're not talking about yoga. The F for flexibility. It is the fact that we are constantly facing change, and the rigid, the resistance, the structured way of thinking. It's good to have organization. It's good to have structures. It's good to have systems. That's how we make changes, to have, systems and processes in place, right? But this ain't that. This is different, right? And so in order to be able to move forward, our mindset has to actually shift forward. Like, oh, wow, I might have to change the date. Or if this is happening over here, instead of playing small and showing up to the meeting and not being fully present, let me communicate. Hey, guys, I'm going to have to sit this one out, or I'm going to come in 10 minutes late because I got to drop off my kid, or this just happened. It may be something that we need to be more flexible on. Our terms, we found during the pandemic, our supply chains have been impacted. So we've been forced to be more flexible. But what about if you exercise that muscle and you learn how to think differently, pull in?
Humanize?
Humanizing leadership. I like you, Erin. The last one is the T, and we've been talking about this. The T is for transparency. Transparency in data, transparency in conversation, transparency. I mean, it's this thing that we've been talking about. Even I'll bring the millennial conversation back in. They're asking, so what do you think? And show me this and tell me this. And it's like, wait a minute. If we put everything on our phones or show our lives, that's a different form of transparency than maybe, and this is a generalization that I'm using, but this is a different form of being transparent than maybe the Gen Xers or baby boomers were used to. We were told that, you have to have a certain clearance to get this information, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to be in a certain room to get this data. And now think about it, with access to so much information, transparency, when we're not being transparent, that's when it shows up. So as leaders, we have to learn how to adapt and exercise these new levels of change and these new ways of being.
And also, really importantly, for those people who are emerging, evolving, or established leaders, full stop, to be more transparent about what they're working on, as long as it's something you can share, but be more transparent with that with your teams, and push it down to the finite level, to those people interfacing with your clients. Let them know how and what they do matters. Because if you're talking about the workplace of the future, particularly people who are showing up at the workplace now, they want to know how they have impact. And if you do not be transparent about that impact, you will have high attrition rates with these individuals. And that is another reason why we're seeing a big push into small businesses, solopreneurs, entrepreneurship, because these individuals want to have an impact, and they also don't want to have you having them work 60 hours a week or something insane like that. It's just not something they're willing to do, and good for them, because that does not equal performance. That doesn't equal productivity. So when you mentioned slowing down to speed up, in fact, in the research I've done, the more breaks you take, just take an average day, you take up to 3 to 4, 10 to 15 minute breaks a day at least, and take your full lunch. Don't work while you're doing that. And turn off at a decent hour, not get back on after dinner. Take these breaks, because when you give yourself time to slow down, your peak performance takes a much higher level, much longer throughout the day. So that is a factual, research-based information. That's so important. And when you mentioned also, Landi, and I'd love to hear any questions or thoughts or comments anybody has that's participating right now as we start to wrap up the show. You mentioned, Landi, also about how people need to really be more flexible and adaptable and authentic, and this diversity, all this change that people are experiencing right now, and how you can show up and be present in your what did you say? You said walk in the experience of yourself.
Yes.
I really like that, because it reminded me of one of my clients who, senior leader, very, very, very senior leader. And through our work together, we discovered that she wasn't walking in the experience of herself. She was still thinking like a manager.
Oh, I get that.
All right. And what you have done in the past has gotten you there. But in order to get you where you want to go, it requires a mindset shift.
Imagine that.
Funny how that works.
So that's, what, Erin, that's a great tie-in to how do we do this. So we've given a couple tips, tools, and techniques to hopefully bridge the gap as you're thinking through what's next for you and for your career and for how you show up. One of the things that I'm very excited about is next month to be launched is the forthcoming book, The A to Z Guide to Shift.
Yay!
And it's the practical tools, tips, and techniques. Like, okay, so how do I do that thing? This is the thing that I'm facing now. How do I do that? How do I make that piece happen? Right. And so when you think about, we've been using this term leaders, and I love how you kind of say, it's all encompassing. You all got it, right? It's so often that people don't, without the title, may not see themselves as leaders, or so you'll be surprised as a leader, like, oh no, that's my boss. That's the VP.
We are all leaders.
Right. We are all leaders. And that's exactly what I wanted to speak to. We are all leaders. We are all making shift happen. We are all facing lots of change and complexity, no matter where your title or your position. One of my good friends and and colleagues were working on this project. And at his company, a major brand that we all know, one of the things about their director level positions, which we're working on coaching to get him to, is walking in the experience of yourself. And they will not give you the position at this company until you've done the work. So think about that. If you want to be this, director level, which there is a vice president, you have to have worked on projects doing the work before you get the position, the title, and the pay. You have to show up as that thing. And so that's the part when I'm saying exercise the muscle. I'm not just talking about the physical muscle. We can see that we can go to the gym. People have been saying, I put this, I got this COVID stuff going, this COVID weight, right, from sitting and being sedentary, right? But who's exercising your brain? Who's getting inside there with you? Who's helping you to be more flexible and see your blind spots? Who's helping you to step into the experience of yourself? Not that you always have to be going fast. Remember, I talked about pulling back to speed up, right? So pulling back could be pulling back on all the work to do your legacy work. What impact do you want to make?
That's very powerful, because we tend to, as you mentioned, add more on our to-do list. Are we being strategic about it based on where we want to go? Oftentimes not. Now, sometimes we're being voluntold. That does happen. And we can also maybe do a better job of speaking up for ourselves and honoring our boundaries and focusing on what we need to do to strategically elevate our careers. So if any of you have any questions for either Landi or myself, it's been a great pleasure having all of you on the show. It's been a tremendous pleasure having you, Landi, on the show. And I so look forward to seeing how you shift and evolve and how you thrive in the years to come. Because one thing about Landi is she does not sit still.
Follow me on LinkedIn. If you're not there, please let's connect. Erin, I'm pleased, honored, and honestly blessed to have been here and spent this time here with you today. You are a dynamic woman. You really are. And you're doing great things yourself in the world. Know that we cannot do this alone. And I have looked forward to this. We've scheduled this a long time out. I hope that your audience has gotten value, because it has been such a great value for me to be here to spend time and space with you. I am very grateful. And as I said, LinkedIn is one of the places where I'm constantly sharing thought leadership. It's a place if someone is looking for someone to facilitate a workshop or have a speaker come in or a coach or whatever that may look like, or do some shift consulting. We do all of that too. So please connect that way.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to your book. I can't wait.
I'm so excited. Thank you for having me. Any other questions or things like that, please, as I said, this might take some time to process as we pull back and reflect. If you haven't gotten your nap today, you talked about those breaks, Erin. One of my clients owns the nap bar. And so
I know that, lady.
That's my executive coaching client, Kalia. And 26 minutes, NASA researched the data that shows if you're going to take a nap, don't make yourself wrong for it. Get some rest, slow down to speed up.
Be kind to you, because you'll be a lot more productive and thrive a lot more when you are kind to you. So it's a great pleasure seeing all of you tuning in today. It's a great pleasure having you on the show today, Landi. And I look forward to conversations to come. And for all of you tuning in for either live or watching the replay, keep thriving and keep elevating, my friends.